But this is the single
Right, we're
greatest.
gonna go ahead and get started. We have some people waiting online as well.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Monet Moore. I'm with the DCHC MPO, and this is going to be the first of a series that we're referring to as MTP 101, and MTP stands for Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So I'm also joined by some of my colleagues at the MPO, and then also some of my colleagues are joining us from Central Pines Regional Council. So before we get into the content, I just want to remind everyone that this meeting will be recorded and the slides will be made available to everyone after the presentation concludes. So let's hop into things, and we're just going to go to our table of contents. So today's MTP 101 is going to focus on analysis and evaluation. And so we'll have a brief introduction of what an MTP is, what an MPO is, and then we'll get into some of the content that we're considering as staff as we go through this MTP process. So what is an MPO? We're federally mandated and funded. We're a transportation policy making organization. We're made up of representatives from local government. So if you are one of those representatives, thank you for attending today. And also governmental transportation authorities, and you'll see some of those partners displayed on our screen later throughout the presentation. And then mostly we conduct the 3C planning process in the region, and that it consists of continuing, cooperative, and comprehensive planning. So what is an MTP? Again, the MTP is federally mandated. It's an emphasis on preservation and efficiency of the improving of existing system. Our planning horizon is at least 20 years, but 25 is preferred. Our current MTP is projected to go until 2055, so destination 2055. We update it every 5 years. We plan for all modes of transportation. It's fiscally constrained, so we don't refer to it as a wish list. And then projects such as the Transportation Improvement Program must be consistent with the MTP if we want to use federal funds. There's extensive public involvement. And then lastly, it's adopted by the MPO and then approved by USDOT and the Federal Highway Administration. So this is an overview of our MTP update process. So we are currently on analysis and evaluation, but prior to this, we have been working on our vision and goals. So taking a review of our current goals and objectives, being able to revise those based upon our community input. We are now in the phase of analysis and evaluation, so more information will come out in regards to that. But during this phase, we're focusing on examining the existing conditions, forecasting future problems, and then developing and analyzing alternative scenarios. After that, we will move into our preferred option, and then we'll finally get into our final plan, which you see isn't going to be until Q4 of 2025. So this is a lengthy process, but this just gives an overview of that entire process. So as we are developing this MTP, as an organization, we do have several partners. So for our region, we partner with our Eastern Triangle partner, CAMPO, or the Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, Central Pines Regional Council, of course, and then others include NCDOT, the Federal Highway Administration, and a few other key stakeholders. So for analysis and evaluation, so things that we consider as we are getting ready or in this planning process is the socioeconomic data that goes into our model. You will sometimes hear us refer to a model or TRM, all of those different terms that we may use. So our step one is we want to forecast the amount of people, so population, and the amount of jobs, employment that we are projecting to have in 2055. And we break that down into two separate categories, our population guide totals and then our employment guide totals. And then after that, our step two, we'll create different future growth scenarios by allocating population and employment growth, basically determining where are people going to be living, where are they going to be working, and then that helps us kind of guide everything in between of how they get from their homes to their work and all the other places in between. And so then our step three is to evaluate the different impacts among those scenarios. So here are just two charts that display a little bit of information that's kind of changed from when you all may have last seen this from 2050, from our 2050 plan to our now 2055 plan. So it's reflecting a growth in population, and it's also reflecting the trends in employment or what's projected. So here, as you look at the population projection, we're showing a slight decrease in the projected population between the 2050 plan and the 2055 plan. And then employment growth, we are reflecting about an additional 23,000 jobs that'll be added to the MPO area. So when we talk about our model, we're talking about the Triangle Regional Model, and we are now using an updated or a new version of the model, which is referred to as G2V2, and then our community biz. So here you will see the entire boundary of our model. You'll also see that community biz model area. And so again, this is used to help us allocate the future growth across the entire region prior to us kind of getting into those alternatives and different ways that the transportation network could evolve through this planning process.
Sorry to interrupt, but do you mind backing up to the population growth and employment growth slides really quick? I'm just spending a second to take it in. So we're seeing roughly 2.2 million in 2020 population, give or take, going up to roughly 3.5 million, if I'm reading right, population in 2050. Is that about right?
Yes.
Okay. And then employment growth, we're going from about 800,000 roughly in 2050, but we're projecting that to be actually going up to about 1 million versus 800,000 when we compare 2055 to 2050. Did I get that?
And that's the growth. That's from today's numbers.
Right.
So yes, the corresponding jobs growth with population explosion.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that.
And I can follow up with those exact numbers as well.
Thank you.
So a little bit about our Triangle Regional Model, Generation 2. So again, this is a new travel forecasting model. You will see the extent of the model, the area that's being covered, and then there's also some details that's included or covered by the regional model. So it's covering 40 jurisdictions. It's covering more than 1 million jobs, 2 million people, 121 transit routes, 10 transit agencies, and about 80,000 university students. And so again, our funding stakeholders for this Triangle Regional Model Generation 2 is DCHC MPO, CAMPO, and then our partners at Go Triangle and NCDOT. So the model application for the MTP. Basically, what are we using the model for? Again, we're forecasting future year network performance. We're understanding the impacts of land use on highway traffic and transit ridership. And then we're testing transportation infrastructure investment strategies, which includes modes of transportation for highway, transit, non-motorized. And then we're also taking a look at air quality analysis and then a cost benefit / payback analysis. So also what goes into this, or actually what comes out of it, is the growth framework. So when we talked about earlier in regards to just where our guide totals for our population, where our guide totals for socioeconomic, another thing that we consider in order to better capture how our land use is developing and how that interacts with our transportation network is our growth framework. And so basically this determines the suitability of land for development. And so we're considering things like, is it underdeveloped? Is there a potential for redevelopment? Where are people going to either put homes or commercial uses or industrial? And then also how many jobs that will create. So as you take a look in regards to the map that we have shown here on the screen, again, produced by Central Pines, those red areas on these maps indicate areas that are more prime for development across the entire regional or across that entire region for both MPOs. And then we have a list of things that we consider in regards to what makes land more suitable than others for development.
I would just say that, going back to that other slide, that's a separate process. That's not part of the triangle regional model. It's something called community visualization. It's like a land use model. And that's what we do to look at the suitability, take those population projections by county and distribute where we think people are going to live and work. And when we have that, that's an input into the triangle regional model, which is transportation. So they're separate.
Thank you, Andy.
And also for the partner, regional partner for the MTP, also including Bowling Graham MPO, we do the final report together, especially for the emission part. And also for project coordination, we have to work with them together, especially for model part.
Yeah, Burlington Graham's west, right?
Yeah,
In
that's-
Alamance County.
Thank you. So here we have the deficiency analysis, and this is something that we're currently working on and building out that deficiency analysis. And ultimately, we're measuring the worst case scenario. And we're answering the question, can currently committed projects handle long-term growth? So basically, is it committed? Is it funded? And if nothing else was to come after what we have planned for the next 4 to 5 years, where would we start seeing failures in our transportation system? What would that look like? And so kind of to display that here, I am reflecting the 2050 E+C scenario congestion map, which stands for existing plus committed. And so you can kind of see where that congestion would start going into the network and increasing if we didn't have any improvements past the next 4 to 5 years. And so for the 2055 plan, we'll also be producing this and just evaluating our current transportation investments. So again, the deficiency analysis represents an unrealistic scenario because funding will continue past the current tip and SIP. Growth behavior patterns would shift, but it's useful because it allows us to create a baseline in order to compare our additional alternatives that we will prepare to, if we didn't change anything, what would it look like? So again, it gives us that baseline and helps us determine where we should be spending funding.
Well, the deficiency that we're analyzing in this step is primarily the model output. So it's measured in volume and capacity of our roads, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So there are other deficiencies like pavement condition, safety problems, bridge condition. Those aren't, they're things we can look at, but they're not necessarily what we're diagnosing.
Yes, that's correct.
Safety's in it.
Be a holistic approach for the deficiency analysis. The example I showed just kind of focused on congestion and congestion alone, but we are considering the other things that's mentioned. Again, and if you were here for the performance measures, you'll see that we're taking a look in regards to conditions for bridges, roadways, all of that good stuff, and then our safety network as well.
It also ignores other forms of transportation. Basically, this is saying what's going on with cars. Right? It doesn't say whether you have a good bike network. All it says is that our roads won't meet the projected demand for cars to use them.
Well, there's measures that come out of the model, which would be like.
The analysis is focused solely on cars.
Well, no, there'll be bike and ped. We'll have mode share, for instance.
It's deficiency analysis as well.
Yeah.
So it's based on the seat capacity. So each bus has a seat capacity.
Yeah.
We compare the passenger.
But I'm saying, but it doesn't include bikes, for example.
Bikes, no, we have a so-called level of stress for the bike. That's from CMP. And we have measure for safety from CMP by corridor. And also this by, in the past is a so-called level of service for bike and ped. But now the professionals starting move from level of service for bike and ped to the level of stress. So this time we try a level of stress. But if policy boards think the level of service of bike and ped still useful, we can get it back.
But you're right. I mean, predominantly the data that we have is roadway and vehicle trips. But there is some alternative modes as well as the data.
So one of the key concepts that we keep in mind or that we utilize during this process is our TAZ or traffic analysis zones. So for folks who are in transportation planning, they may not necessarily be as super familiar with this like geographic area. And so basically it's a simple subdivision of the study area for use in the TRM. They're all have unique identifiers. And so we're reflecting one here on the screen. They are typically created along census boundaries, either by the block, group, or tract. And then they contain similar land uses and key travel access points. And so as we continue this like series of education around the MTP, as we continue to bring things forward to our board and our TC, if you hear the term traffic analysis zone or TAZ, this is kind of what we're looking at in our base geographic areas that we're considering as we are doing our modeling. And so some upcoming milestones for this, or for the MTP, this is our anticipated schedule, a presentation of that deficiency analysis in January of 2025, a presentation of the proposed alternatives in January of 2025, a presentation of the alternatives analysis in March of 2025, and that's when those performance measures will also be coming back into play. And then public engagement on those alternatives analysis is planned in the spring. We're looking at March until June of 2025. And then the presentation of the preferred scenario in June of 2025, and then public engagement on that preferred scenario in July of 2025. And so as we continue to kind of come back, present information, if this schedule changes, we'll make sure you all are aware of that, and then also be engaging with different partners to ensure that our public engagement is reaching far across the region. But this is our upcoming milestones, and then
Comment on the public engagement is that July is probably the worst month of the year to do public engagement because particularly our university communities, Chapel Hill and Durham to a lesser extent, as university places, that is when lots of people are on vacation. So you may want to rethink exactly how you're going to manage the public engagement because July, certainly like in a town like Chapel Hill, is the absolute worst time to try to have public meetings or anything like that.
we'll take that into consideration. And so at this time, we will open the floor for questions, open this floor for discussions. And then if we have any folks who are joining us virtually via Zoom, feel free to put the questions that you have in the chat as well.
I have a question about the nature of public engagement. I serve on the Orange County Planning Board right now, and the future land use plan is in full swing in Orange County. And public engagement is always an area, as Michael pointed out, there's some challenges. And how, or perhaps maybe at some point, when would we see a plan that shows how we're going to reach communities that may not always be easy to reach in community, because we know certain, that's been a challenge.
Absolutely. So when we first started off this process, there was a public involvement strategy that was adopted prior to, and that kind of forms as the guides in regards to when we should be engaging with the public, when we should also be interacting with our board and our TC. And so what we recently drafted in partnership with CAMPO is a work back schedule for all of 2025. And the things that we are considering is what community groups that we want to partner with, what community events are coming up that we would be able to present information at, or even have surveys at. And so we've started identifying those community stakeholders, not only just for engagement, but being able to have community partners review the materials to make sure that we're speaking in a language that everyone can kind of understand, that's not so like technical and jargon. And so it is something that we put a lot of thought into, and being able to partner with community and get true feedback and meaningful input.
And I'd also like to really praise Monet and her work, our overall public outreach processes and improving those. It's very important to maintain connections and and in-person relationships. But we're also going to be exploring some online opportunities for input and collecting feedback. And some of the benefits of that, even though they're much less personal, we're able to get much more data out of them. So we had hired a marketing consultant to help us understand what some of those techniques are and when best to apply them, all the different things we do here. And we're going to be incorporating some of those tools into the MTP outreach as well.
Yeah, things like targeted advertising, you can actually like select which demographics you want to hear from. We're already experimenting with these in some of our smaller planning efforts, so we'll be able to build upon that for the MTP.
And you know, our marketing partners, they understand, you know, the click-through rate and survey completion rates, how many touch points we need. And it's actually, Campo has done this a little bit with some of their outreach and targeting underrepresented communities. And I think they've had some pretty good results from that. So we hope to build on it going forward.
In terms of the, you know, the preferred scenario, refresh my memory. It's not just picking one out of 3 or 4. It's basically ultimately becomes a mix and match, right? Where you pick selected elements from each and combine them in this essentially into a new scenario. Do I have that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
All right, if no one else has any more questions, I think we can close this session. However, if you do have questions that come to mind after we close out, feel free to contact us here at the MPO and we'll make sure we get those questions answered. Again, this presentation will be available online and this is the first of many. So I want to thank you all for joining us today.
So Monet,
Oh, I'm sorry, Matt Day is
I don't have a
speaking.
question, but a question I have heard from some people is what is their best opportunity to sort of have input into how the alternatives get crafted and that sort of like, how can they provide input on that?
How would you answer that one, Matt?
So I know I saw on your schedule slide, you had, I think in January that you're going to be presenting the alternatives, the proposed alternatives. So I guess, would that be the opportunity? Is that the time for people to come in and be prepared to provide their feedback and their input on how those are defined and created?
I think that would be ideal. We plan on having a joint board meeting for both DCHC and Campo in order to present that. And at our public meetings, we always accept comments. And that way it will kind of give our staff a little bit more time. If they're presented at that time, we will then have time as staff to kind of tweak, make any adjustments prior to them going out to the public for engagement opportunities. So we can kind of clean it up a little bit before it goes out to a broader audience. All right, well, that seems like that is our last question of today. Again, thank you everyone for attending and we look forward to working with you all in the future.
Thank you, Monet.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.